In late 1992, soldiers at Fort Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska gathered around a small television. They were transfixed by a strange news report. Seismologists had detected something strange and deep under the Alaskan wilderness. Earlier that same year, China had detonated a massive 1 megaton nuclear device under the remote sands of Lop Nor. The Earth's shock waves rippled through the crust, and when the seismic data was analyzed, they made a shocking discovery. The only problem was the information was forbidden. According to the broadcast, there was something discovered hundreds of feet below the ground and roughly 60 miles west of Mount McKinley, which is in Denali National Park. Mid-broadcast, the program ended and the story vanished. Well, not quite. One of the men watching that evening was Douglas A. Mutchler, a U.S. Army counterintelligence warrant officer stationed at Fort Richardson. His job was hunting espionage and terrorism threats, but even something like this was far beyond his level. Shortly after arriving in Alaska in 1989, Mutchler had been studying a map of Denali National Park when he noticed a thumb-sized area west of Denali with a strange label, "Area Not Surveyed to Date." While it didn't make sense at the time, this was the first thing that popped up in his mind after the broadcast. Determined to find out more, Mutchler set his VCR to record the late-night news for any follow-up. However, the 11 o'clock broadcast made no mention of the strange discovery again. Confused by this, he reached out to the TV station the following day, and in fact, he actually drove into Anchorage to the exact news station and asked about the segment. To his shock, the station manager claimed that no such news story had ever aired or even existed, but he insisted that he and dozens of fellow soldiers had all watched it, only to be told they were mistaken. No footage existed, and there was nothing to show for it. When Mutchler turned to leave, a young studio technician caught him in the lobby and beckoned him aside. The young man appeared very nervous and whispered to him that he was right. The broadcast was real. It had run during the 6 o'clock news the previous evening, but shortly afterward, men in black arrived and pressured the station into cutting the story for reasons of national security. All tapes and transcripts of the report were confiscated and/or destroyed. After the news piece was erased from the station's archives, all employees were warned to forget it ever happened or face severe consequences. That evening, back on base, Mutchler informed his colleagues what he learned. As you can imagine, everybody was baffled because nearly 40 people in his unit alone had watched the same broadcast, and now it was being officially denied. Clearly, someone knew more about this subterranean discovery and had swiftly gagged the media. Now, for a counterintelligence officer like Mutchler, the cover-up only raised his suspicions. In 1993, Mutchler was transferred to Fort Meade, Maryland, which is well known as the home of the National Security Agency, or NSA. There, he had access to a classified government archive facility as part of his duties. He figured this might be his chance to dig up information on the strange underground discovery if any records still existed. One day, he casually asked the archive librarian if there are any files on archaeological sites or even underground discoveries made in Alaska. He was given a slip with catalog numbers and directions to a section of the file warehouse. After carefully navigating the labyrinth, he found what he was looking for. After pulling out a couple of folders, he had barely sat down to begin sifting through the papers when he sensed a presence behind him. Two men appeared seemingly out of nowhere in dark suits with very stern expressions. They told him verbatim, "You don't have a need to know for that information," and ordered him to close the files immediately. Mutchler protested that he was only researching archaeological sites, but the agents were not fooled. They explained, "We know what you're looking for," with the second agent adding a cryptic warning that truly shook Mutchler. They basically told him, "You're poking somewhere they don't want to be touched. Back off." Stunned by their response, he was firmly instructed to leave the archive immediately and was then escorted out, making it clear that his personal investigation was over. This confirmed in his mind that the US government or some faction within it was actively protecting information about this alleged discovery deep under Alaska. You have to remember that he was nobody special, at least officially, just a warrant officer poking around. Somebody, though, was watching closely enough to intervene the moment he got too close. For the remainder of his military career, he just kept his head down and did not pursue it any further. Until many years later, after retiring from the service, he decided to go public with his story, hoping that someone somewhere could shed some light on what it was he witnessed. But what Mutchler stumbled upon wasn't new. In fact, this seemed like it was a long-running, multi-generational secret. This episode is sponsored by Tempo. Let's be real. Most of us don't have time to cook balanced meals every day, but that's where Tempo comes in. Tempo is a recurring weekly meal delivery subscription that sends you chef-crafted, single-serving meals that are fully prepared and cook in just 2 minutes. Their menus are dietitian approved with over 24 fresh options every week, and they're all made with real ingredients you'd find in your own kitchen or at the grocery store. The best part, Tempo supports your healthy lifestyle by making it easy to grab a quick, flavorful meal without sacrificing nutrition or taste. Tempo's rotating menu includes 20 mindful choices, everything from protein-packed meals with 30 grams plus of protein to calorie-conscious meals under 500 calories, carb-conscious meals with under 35 grams of carbs, and fiber-rich meals with 20% of your daily fiber needs. So whatever your goals, there's something that fits. Personally, I love how Tempo saves me time, no chopping, no cleanup, just fresh, nutrient-rich meals that go from fridge to table in 2 minutes flat. It's honestly the fastest meal prep hack I've ever used. So if you want fresh, flavorful meals delivered right to your door and ready to eat in minutes, head to tempomeals.com or scan the QR code on screen to try Tempo for yourself. That's Tempo, meal prep done for you in just 2 minutes. And now, back to the episode. In the spring of 1978, Lee Pearson, a retired military veteran, was teaching school in the small town of Unalakleet on Alaska's western coast. One day at the local airstrip, he struck up a conversation with a helicopter pilot who was stopping over. Discovering that both were veterans, the pilot decided to confide in Lee and even make him an unusual offer. He had a flight scheduled the next day, a routine supply run to a secret site near Denali, and invited Lee as a tag-along as an unofficial passenger. Craving some adventure, Lee agreed, and the next morning, Lee boarded a military chopper loaded with crates of important equipment, and they took off heading due east into the vast expanse of Alaska. But as the helicopter approached the rugged foothills west of Denali, the pilot turned and gave a very strange warning. He explained, in 5 miles, the aircraft's instruments might go haywire. Moments later, the radar blipped out and the compass needle began spinning crazily. Alarms rang all around the cockpit as electronic gauges malfunctioned one by one. Eventually, the radio went silent and the interior lights died, as if some immense electromagnetic field had snapped them out. The helicopter, however, kept flying normally. The pilot stayed calm and switched to manual vision navigation, or VFR, and continued toward the destination. Lee peered out the window as they descended into a remote valley. Below, a small cluster of buildings came into view, virtually in the middle of nowhere. The helicopter set down on a makeshift landing zone next to a few huts and 2 squat guard towers. Immediately, armed personnel swarmed around the craft, and these soldiers carried rifles and wore black uniforms with 0 identifiers, no patches, ranks, or names. Others took up defensive positions around the perimeter, while others unloaded the cargo crates. In the distance, Lee could see a mounted 50 cal was trained on them. This was obviously a very serious situation. But the entire offloading op took only minutes, and before he knew it, the pilot was motioning that they were taking off again. It was revealed to Pearson later on that the place is more secret than the Manhattan Project. The US military had a covert base there to study and perhaps utilize the strange discovery below. An individual who identified himself as the adopted son of a Western electric engineer told of his father's classified work. This man said his late father, Marty Johnson, had worked on a top-secret project in Alaska in the late 1950s. After World War II, his father earned degrees in electrical engineering and physics and was recruited by the military around 1959 for a highly classified assignment in Alaska. The father spoke only sparingly about it, but over the years, he let slip a few incredible details. He and a select team of experts were stationed at an underground structure in Alaska. Their task was to study and attempt to understand this because it was some kind of extraordinary power source or energy technology. The government, though, took extreme measures to keep everything about the project top secret, and speaking of power, Marty Johnson's son recounted that his father described the work as a study in energy distribution. Whatever was buried deep under Alaska had immense power capacity. Only after hearing Doug Muchler's account in 2012 did the son fully realize what his dad had been talking about all those years ago, and in fact, it goes deeper. No pun intended. The US government had actually known about this discovery as far back as the 1940s, and over time had quietly brought in experts to analyze it for decades before the public ever knew about it via the seismic data in 1992. Digging through his late father's papers, the son hoped to find documents from that period, but as expected, anything related was either long gone or kept in strictest confidence. During the Cold War era, the US Intelligence Committee ran the Stargate project, which employed psychics to remotely view hidden targets. One of the most well-known viewers was Pat Price. He allegedly pinpointed an alien base under Mount Hayes. It's actually located in the heart of the Alaskan Triangle. Declassified documents described how Price saw human-looking aliens inside this mountain who had the ability to exert psychic control over humans. He even noted that the site was responsible for mysterious equipment malfunctions in the general area. Of course, this was all kept super hush-hush at the time. Even more disturbing is that Price died under very mysterious circumstances in 1975. We can only wonder if he saw too much. Unfortunately, it wasn't until decades later when his testimony became public. Many speculated that he knew exactly what this discovery under Alaska was and why it was being used. Fast forward to the summer of 2012, and Doug Muchler reached out to an investigative journalist famed for exploring UFOs and various government cover-ups, Linda Moulton Howe, a veteran reporter and even an Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker who ran the Earth Files news service. She was also a frequent guest on the paranormal radio show Coast to Coast AM. Muchler emailed her with the information that he had, and of course, she was very intrigued but also very cautious. To verify his wild claims, she requested proof of his credentials. So he gave her his military ID, his service records, his DD-214 discharge papers, which verified his background and posting in Alaska. Realizing that he was the real deal, he was interviewed at length and first broke his astonishing story on Coast to Coast AM on July 26, 2012. As it turns out, the discovery that all these people spoke about was a large black pyramid deep beneath Alaska. It sounded unbelievable, but Doug Muchler's sincerity and detailed recollections added a lot of credibility. In fact, within weeks after this interview, Howe began receiving messages from people claiming they or their family members had knowledge of this mysterious black pyramid and that what Muchler was saying was the truth. In Marty Johnson's account, the pyramid was massive, twice the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza, he reportedly told his family. And it's composed of a very strange dark material, and even stranger is that the construction and architecture do not mirror a typical Egyptian pyramid. It has a steeper slope, and the base lies below the ground and is completely submerged under rock. If this is true, the dimensions alone would make it absolutely enormous. Disturbingly, Marty Johnson's account suggested one possible purpose: an energy conductor. And as a matter of fact, the military thought this too and were trying to harness the power of this pyramid. Rumor has it that Johnson himself constructed a scaled-down model of it in his home made from aluminum, and when he applied a current to it, it allegedly outputted more energy than was put in. In fact, it was enough to power his house and barn. Now, it can't be verified, but the account does align with others that suggest this black pyramid can amplify energy or even draw from the Earth's natural electromagnetic field. Similarly, the pilot who flew with Lee Pearson explained that he believed the Black Pyramid was some sort of monumental power plant and that it was capable of producing so much energy it could theoretically power the entire country. But As the accounts continued to pour into Linda, she realized this theory was becoming more plausible. A retired Navy captain contacted her to describe how, in the 1980s, he supervised radar stations in Alaska and frequently observed very strange interferences on all the instruments whenever they would point in the direction of the specific sections of woods near Mount McKinley. Eventually, learning of the Black Pyramid under Alaska, the bizarre electromagnetic disturbances made sense. Unfortunately, he made the mistake of mentioning this theory to his superiors and was immediately threatened with court-martial if he valued his career. Something was obviously out there and forbidden to discuss, and the military knew it. Around the same time, Howe also had a chance to speak with a woman who claimed to be a skilled remote viewer. This woman told Linda that she saw a camouflaged entrance somewhere in the Alaskan range. There was a small building that led to an elevator shaft that descended hundreds of feet, and then she saw a very extensive facility that included offices, hallways, and laboratories. Eventually, she found herself in a very large chamber looking at one wall of what had to be the discovery itself. The room was very busy. There were many military personnel, scientists, and technicians busily going about their tasks. But the most disturbing aspect is that not all of them were human. It was evident that whoever was in charge of this facility was a non-human intelligence. She explained to Linda that this Black Pyramid had one true purpose. It was an energy source and a charging station for UFO aircraft. This would explain why Alaska, specifically this area, which is known as the Alaskan Triangle, has been such a hot spot for strange and unusual activity, including thousands upon thousands of sightings and accounts of UFOs and other strange things and magnetic anomalies. Over 16,000 people have mysteriously vanished here. And many native tribes believe that there's a supernatural evil force that exists and that it's very dangerous. A man named Nathan Campbell became obsessed with trying to solve the whole Black Pyramid mystery and was confident that with his survival skills, if he just went out and camped out in the bush long enough, he would be able to locate it. He spent a considerable time planning out his camp and the entire area he was going to search. On May 27th of 2020, Nathan hired a bush pilot to fly him into the extreme northwest corner of Denali National Park. The pilot dropped him off by a remote alpine waterway called Carey Lake. But Nathan was no novice. He was loaded with 4 months worth of supplies, camping gear, and even a two-way satellite communicator to stay in touch. His intentions were to live off the land to comb the region for any signs of this strange pyramid. Nathan was quite active for several weeks and even checked in via text messages on a satellite link. But by mid-June of 2020, he just stopped responding. The seasons continued to change, and when 4 months came and went, Campbell never arrived at the prearranged pickup point. Fearing for the worst, the pilot notified the family as well as the National Park Service. When search teams were dispatched to Carey Lake, they eventually found Nathan's campsite, but unfortunately, there was no sign of Nathan. But they still found a tent that was weather-beaten and collapsed, along with plastic bins of provisions and, of course, his journal. The last entry in his diary was back in June and simply wrote, "Went to get water." Even after extensive air and ground searches of the area, there was no sign of him. Fast forward to October 1st of 2020, Nathan Campbell was officially declared missing and presumed dead. To this very day, his disappearance remains unsolved. On October 27th, 1998, an anonymous man in his early 20s was busy making about a 100-mile commute to work. He was driving on Trunk Road, a very narrow, windy road located between the towns of Palmer and Wasilla, well within the Alaskan Triangle. Now, because of these long commute times, he often didn't get home until around 2 in the morning. And as he was driving along, he slowed his vehicle down as he came to a curve in the road. And just then, his headlights caught a large dark figure that was roughly 5 car lengths away, but in the ditch. His first thought was that it was a moose because there are so many in the area, but as the seconds passed, he realized it couldn't have been a moose because it was standing up on 2 legs. However, it couldn't have been a bear because it looked too strange and its physique was different. He realized he was looking at a Halloween prop, but the placing of it was very odd. Whoever had worked on this clearly put a lot of time and effort into it, and the sheer detail of the muzzle and the upright ears and even the fur was so realistic. He even made out that it had hawked legs and, for the most part, resembled a dog if a dog were to stand upright. Genuinely impressed by the work that went into this, he began to slow his vehicle even more so, just so he could get a better look. And at that moment, the thing he was looking at turned its head to look towards his oncoming vehicle. Startled and shocked that this wasn't a prop, it began to move, and he saw just how fluid its movements were. So much so that he slammed on the gas pedal to get away and fishtailed, nearly ending up in the ditch it was in too. His tires caught the pavement, fortunately, and he flew out of there, never looking back in the rearview mirror. Whatever he saw completely terrified him because he's only been on that road a few times since his sighting, but refuses to go in the dark. The witness described this unknown animal as having an aura about it, and the only word they could use to describe it was predatory. On the night of August 16, 2003, several teenagers were out trying to snag salmon in the tidal pools in Seward, Alaska. After having a relatively normal evening up until this point, they began seeing what they would describe as strange eye shine coming from the tall grass. Eventually, one of them shined their flashlights at the eye shine, and they were horrified by what they saw. These were not animals, but what they would later describe as stick people, roughly 3 feet high with large heads and eyes that reflected green. They were overcome with terror as they realized they were being hunted by about 15 to 20 of them. They were moving quickly in the grass, moving closer, forfeiting any salmon they caught. All of them just made a mad dash for the main road. More of these stick people pursued them but disappeared in the heavy, brushy area and vanished altogether. Strangely, an unrelated adult witness later reported experiencing a loud ringing in his ears as he visited the area that same night. Fast forward to May 7th of 2008, and around the same area, a man named Nick Andrew Jr. was snowmobiling and hunting birds out of town. On his way back home, he just got this feeling that he really needed to check on a specific location nearby. And when he did, he actually recognized a small boy from the village who was all alone in the middle of the marsh. He called out to him and asked, why was he out here all alone? Where was his father or any hunting partners? But the boy was very, very shaken. He was scared, he had been crying, and all he could answer was, I don't know. Nick was deeply disturbed by the entire event. The boy was very disoriented, very confused, and just dazed, and didn't seem to have any concept of time. Strangely though, there were no footprints in the snow indicating that anybody had walked in the area. It was all very puzzling. During his search for prints, he counted at least 10 other snowmobiles in the neighborhood, and none of whom had spotted the boy. After getting him back to the village, he left his VHS radio on overnight in case somebody else would report a missing child, but nobody did. When the boy was asked about his experience, he explained that he was brought into Pitcher Mountain, a location often associated with Ursinrat beings. He was questioned there and said he made contact with another little girl who was abducted over 40 years ago. At some point, these beings decided they were going to release the boy, and that's apparently when he came to. The Ursinrat are found commonly in Yupik teachings and lore. They are essentially little people who dwell underground. According to legend, they trap and capture humans. These are just a small handful of accounts from the Alaskan Triangle that could suggest maybe there truly is something strange going on underground in this entire region. Bruce Pearson, son of late Lee Pearson, used clues left behind by his father to get to the bottom of this mystery. He could estimate that the area in question was roughly east of Unalakleet and west of Denali. Bruce scoured maps and satellite images looking for anything anomalous in the expanse of the tundra. In the general area of the coordinates given by Doug Mutchler and others, he did notice one interesting feature on Google Earth: an isolated patch of land with unnaturally straight edges, like a square clearing amid the terrain. To the naked eye, it's pretty subtle, but it does stand out from the shapes of nature. Intrigued by this finding, Bruce arranged to fly over the site in a small plane, bringing along a camera. When he saw it for the first time, his eyes just widened because below was a large quadrilateral clearing with discernible right angles, which means it's not a natural formation. After several passes, he can make out the overgrown remains of what appeared to be an old road or track leading toward this clearing before vanishing. Even strangers spotted the faint outline of an abandoned airstrip nearby, a kind of crude runway carved into the earth. Of course, none of these features appeared on any official map, and the nearest road was nearly 100 miles away. Interestingly, the location was extremely close to coordinates that an anonymous retired naval officer had earlier given to Linda, that this was supposedly the site of the pyramid. Things were definitely lining up. After the aerial survey, Bruce wanted to conduct a full-on expedition on foot for entrances or any other signs that existed. Interestingly, there has been no scientific survey that has found a geometric edifice beneath Alaska. The U.S. Geological Survey did not report any anomalous readings in '92 beyond the normal seismic waves from the Chinese nuclear tests. Remember that if any discovery were truly this top secret, rank and file scientists might not be informed or would be compelled to deny any knowledge. There's probably a reason there is no substantial evidence. Even the supposed infrared satellite photo provided by a Navy source to Linda, which supposedly pinpointed the site, was examined by researchers and found to be inconclusive. Even though we do have multiple eyewitness accounts corroborating the same conclusion, Doug Muchler's story does have some inconsistencies that hurt his credibility. While he's a genuine person who shared his credentials, the fact that China's nuclear test occurred in May, whereas Muchler recalled the news airing in late November of that year, that alone might prove to some that there is a fabrication. It's possible he might have mixed up his memories, but he was very adamant about what he and the others watched on TV and when. I don't think he had anything to gain from this, and he didn't come forward until 20 years later, presumably beyond any statute of limitation on breaking secrecy oaths. In fact, during the Cold War, the US built early warning radar sites, underground facilities, and conducted hidden projects in Alaska like the HAARP Ionospheric Research Program. I mean, it's obvious the military has a vested interest in Alaska's remote wilderness. It makes you wonder, is all this information true, or is this possibly a smokescreen for a far more deadly and dangerous cover-up? Or this might all simply be a misidentification for a classified weapon system or something more mundane? Look, I laid out all the information for you guys. You're all gonna have to come to your own conclusions because, unfortunately, the truth of the Black Pyramid's existence remains a mystery. And because you guys made it this far into the episode, I want you to all comment below beneath the ice. So that way I know who made it to the end and who didn't. If you guys enjoy storytelling like this, where we dive into strange cases of the mysterious and supernatural, what are you waiting for? Smack that like and subscribe button right now for more content just like this. As always, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you all in the very next episode.